I want you to try a little visualization exercise with me. Picture a head of state.
Okay.
Close your eyes if you have to. Unless you're driving, please don't close your eyes if you're driving. But picture a president. You are probably imagining, a sharp suit, a silk tie, maybe a flag pin on the lapel.
Right. Someone with perfect posture, hair that never moves.
Exactly. And a way of speaking that sounds like it's been focus grouped to death.
The standard model. The politician.
That's the one. Now, I want you to delete that image. Alt-Delete. Instead, I want you to picture a man in a rumpled sweater, hair kind of messy, chain-smoking cigarettes, like his life depends on it. He looks a little bit terrified, honestly. He's standing on a balcony, staring out at a sea of people, and he has just been handed the keys to an entire country.
And his qualifications.
Oh, and his previous job experience, rolling beer barrels in a brewery and writing plays about people who talk in complete gibberish.
It sounds like fiction. If you pitched this script to a Hollywood studio, they would probably tell you it's too on the nose. It's too perfect of an underdog story.
But this is the actual reality of Václav Havel.
It is.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are unpacking what I think is one of the most improbable stories of the 20th century. We are looking at the life of Václav Havel, the bourgeois child, the lab assistant, the playwright, the prisoner, and eventually the president.
The philosopher king, as he was sometimes called, though, as we will see, he probably would have rolled his eyes at that title.
He rolled his eyes at a lot of titles. But we have a specific mission today. We aren't just doing a biography. We have a massive stack of sources here. His letters from prison, his absurdist plays, historical records of the Velvet Revolution, and his own dense philosophical essays.
And we are trying to answer one central question: how?
How? How does a shy, socially awkward intellectual who just wanted to listen to the Velvet Underground and write weird theater end up dismantling a totalitarian empire without firing a single shot?
And more importantly, how does his philosophy, this idea of living in truth, actually work? Because it sounds nice on a bumper sticker, live in truth, but in practice.
In practice, as we go through the sources, it turns out to be actually kind of terrifying.
It is. It is a weaponized philosophy. It demands everything from you. And to understand how he arrived at it, we have to understand the sheer absurdity of the world he was born into.
So let's get into it. Part 1, the bourgeois outsider.
Right.
If we are talking about the People's Republic and the communist takeover of Czechoslovakia, you usually assume the heroes of the story start at the bottom, right? The downtrodden worker fighting the power.
Generally, yes, that is the standard revolutionary narrative. But Havel starts at the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
The 1%.
Oh, way beyond that. If you were looking for a candidate least likely to survive, let alone lead, under a communist regime, you would build Václav Havel in a lab.
The sources emphasize this bourgeois background. But I feel like that term is a bit dry. It doesn't really capture it. We need to paint the picture. How rich are we talking here?
We are talking the Rockefellers of Prague, levels of influence. I mean, his grandfather, Václav Havel, didn't just own property, he built the cultural heart of the city. Have you ever seen photos of the Lucerna Palace in Prague?
I looked it up while prepping. It looks like something out of The Great Gatsby. It's huge.
It is massive. It's this Art Nouveau entertainment complex right on Wenceslas Square. It has a cinema, a theater, a grand ballroom, restaurants, arcades.
The center of the universe for Prague society.
It was the place to be seen in the early 20th century. And his uncle, Mili Havel, he built the Barrandov Film Studios, which was essentially the Hollywood of Central Europe.
So young Václav, born in 1936, is growing up surrounded by movie stars, directors, intellectuals, and servants. He's the little prince of Prague.
Exactly. He described his childhood as being in a golden cage. He actually felt guilty about it later in life. There's this anecdote where he talks about being a child and feeling ashamed that he had a governess while other kids were playing in the street.
He felt isolated by it.
Totally isolated by his own privilege.
Yeah.
He wanted to be normal, but he was walled off by wealth.
Which is deeply ironic, because that privilege was about to be stripped away very, very violently.
1948. The communist coup. The victorious February. The Iron Curtain slams down, and almost overnight, the Havel family goes from being cultural royalty to being class enemies.
Class enemy.
Yeah.
That's a specific legal and social designation, right?
Right.
It's not just people being mean to him on the playground.
No. This is systemic. It's a formal label. The regime confiscates the Lucerna Palace. They confiscate the studios. The family is evicted from their properties.
They lose everything.
They lose the wealth, yes. But the real punishment wasn't financial. It was existential. The regime decided that because of his bloodline, Václav Havel did not deserve a future.
This is the part of the sources that really frustrated me. We had this kid who is obviously brilliant. He's reading Kafka and philosophy at age 15, and the state says, no, you can't go to high school.
It was a strategy of cadre assessment. The state controlled all education, all opportunities. If your profile was bourgeois, you were barred from the humanities.
Why? What were they so afraid of?
They didn't want the old elite infecting the new socialist generation with their dangerous ideas. They wanted to break the intellectual lineage completely.
So they deny him an education.
Right.
What does he do? Does he just give up?
No. And this is the first instance of a pattern we're going to see his whole life. He doesn't just quit. He finds a workaround. He gets a job as a chemical laboratory assistant.
A chemical lab assistant.
Can you imagine a teenage boy who dreams of being a poet, who is obsessed with theater and metaphysics, is forced to spend 4 years washing beakers and staring at test tubes?
Talk about a fish out of water.
Completely. But he works the lab job by day, and then he enrolls in evening classes at a gymnasium, basically night school, to get his secondary diploma. He just chips away at it. He finally finishes in 1954.
So he gets a diploma. Does that open the doors? Is he finally allowed in?
Not at all. Not even a little bit. He applies to university for philosophy, for history, for drama. Rejected, rejected, rejected. That cadre report, that class enemy label, it follows him everywhere.
It's almost comical how afraid the state was of this one teenager reading books.
Yeah.
It feels like they knew, even then, that he was trouble.
They were afraid of independent thought in any form. So he tries a Hail Mary. He enrolls in the Faculty of Economics at the Czech Technical University.
Economics. That does not sound like him.
He hated it. He
Yeah.
barely understood the math. He later said he spent most of his time looking out the window or writing poems in the margins of his ledger. He dropped out after 2 years. He just couldn't fake it.
And thank God he couldn't. Because if he had become a mediocre economist, we wouldn't have the Havel we know.
Exactly. The failure of his academic career pushed him toward the only place that would take him, the theater.
But not through the front door.
No, through the stage door. He starts as a stagehand.
A stagehand. So he's moving props, pulling ropes, weeping the floor.
First at the theater ABC, and then at the legendary theater on the Balustrade. And this is crucial. He wasn't learning theater from a textbook in a lecture hall. He was learning it from the floorboards up.
He saw the mechanics of it.
He saw how the lights worked, how the actors moved, how the audience breathed. He understood the machinery of communication from the inside out.
And this is the 1960s now. The atmosphere is starting to thaw a little bit, right? The Prague Spring is on the horizon.
Just a little. There's a buzzing energy in the air. Small avant-garde theaters are popping up, pushing the boundaries of what the censors would allow, and Havel starts writing.
Okay, let's talk about the plays. Because when I hear absurdist theater, I think of Samuel Beckett, waiting for Godot guys sitting around doing nothing, questioning existence. Is that what Havel was doing?
Yes and no. He was definitely influenced by Beckett. In fact, they became distant admirers of each other, which we'll get to. But Havel's absurdism was much more political. It wasn't just about the meaninglessness of life in general. It was about the specific manufactured meaninglessness of life under communism.
Can you give us an example? The source material highlights the memorandum from 1965.
This is his masterpiece of that era. It's brilliant. Imagine an office, a typical boring bureaucracy. Suddenly, the management introduces a new official language called Taidip.
Taidepi. Even the name sounds impossible to pronounce.
It's meant to. The premise is that natural human language is too emotional, too imprecise. It leads to misunderstandings.
So they want to fix language.
Exactly. The bureaucrats engineer Taidip to be scientifically perfect. Every word has a precise definition. The only problem is the words are incredibly long and complex, and the grammar is impossible.
So nobody can actually speak it.
No one. The main character, Gross, receives a memo written in Taibis, but he can't read it. To get it translated, he needs authorization from a Taidip specialist. But to get the authorization, he needs to file a request.
Which must be written in Taide.
You got it. It's a catch-22. It's a loop of total paralysis. People are running around with dictionaries, terrified of using the wrong word, while the actual work of the office stops completely.
It creates chaos in the name of order.
That's the perfect way to put it. He is holding up a mirror to the regime. The audience at the theater on the Balustrade would watch this and roar with laughter. But it was that laughter of recognition.
They live this every day.
They lived in a world where the party slogans meant nothing, where the rules changed yesterday, where you needed a stamp to get a stamp.
He took the terrifying reality of the police state and turned it into a joke.
And that is a very dangerous thing to do. Because if you can laugh at the monster becomes less scary. The authorities knew this. They watched him very closely. But here's the kicker. The play was so good, it crossed the Iron Curtain.
It went to New York, right?
In 1968, the Public Theater in New York puts on the memorandum. He wins an Obie Award. Suddenly, this class enemy stagehand is the toast of the Western theater world.
He's finding his voice. He's successful. He's relatively young. It feels like he's on an upward trajectory. And then history interferes again.
August 21st, 1968.
The Prague Spring ends. Not with a whimper, but with a bang.
Or rather, the rumble of Soviet tanks. The brief period of freedom is crushed. 200,000 Warsaw Pact troops and 2,000 tanks invade Czechoslovakia to restore order.
And where was Havel when this happened?
He was in Liberec, a town in the north, and this is where he stops being just an observer, just a playwright. He goes to the local radio station.
Oh, wow.
Now remember, the Soviets are taking over the broadcast towers, but Havel and his friends keep broadcasting. He's on the air, narrating the invasion as it happens, telling people what's going on, urging nonviolent resistance.
He's the voice of the resistance.
Really?
For a week, yes. But the tanks win. The hardliners take over. And this begins the era known as normalization.
Normalization? Sounds so benign.
It sounds terrifying. It means we're going to flatten everything until it fits. A return to total conformity.
Yeah.
And Havel, he is erased. His plays are banned. He is forbidden from leaving the country. His passport is confiscated. He goes from Broadway success back to zero.
He's a non-person?
A non-person, shut out of a cultural life completely. And this leads to what I think is the most cinematic visual of his life. The famous playwright, the guy who just won an Obie Award in New York, rolling barrels in a brewery.
The Krakenow Brewery in Trutnov, 1974.
Why a brewery? I mean, why not a library or a bookstore? Something closer to his world.
Because he needed a job where he could be invisible, and under communism, unemployment was illegal. It was called parasitism. If you didn't have a stamp in your ID card saying you were employed, you went to prison.
Like she had to have a job, any job.
Any job. So the intellectuals, the philosophers, the writers, they became window washers, stokers, and in Havel's case, brewery workers.
But he didn't stop writing. This is where the Vanek plays come from, and I want to dig into audience because the dynamic there is just so weird.
It's incredibly meta. Havel writes a play called Audience. The main character is Ferdinand Vanek, and Vanek is a playwright who has been forced to work in a brewery.
Subtle.
Very. And the whole play is just a conversation between Vanek and the brewmaster.
Okay, so what's the setup?
The brewmaster is this earthy, functional alcoholic who is terrified of the secret police. The secret police have told the brewmaster that he has to write weekly reports on Vanek. What is he saying? Who is he meeting?
But the brewmaster is too drunk and uneducated to write the report.
Exactly. So the brewmaster, in this moment of just pathetic desperation, asks Vanek, the dissident, if he would mind writing the secret police reports on himself.
Please spy on yourself for me because I'm too tired.
It's perfect, right? It captures the moral rot of the system perfectly. It's not about hate. The brewmaster doesn't hate Vanek. He actually likes him. He wants to drink with him. But the system forces them into this absurd betrayal.
It's not about good versus evil. It's about the system making everyone complicit.
Everyone is trapped in the lie.
And these plays spread like wildfire. But they weren't in theaters.
No. Samizdat. We need to explain this because in the age of the internet, it's hard to grasp. Imagine typing a manuscript on a typewriter with 12 sheets of carbon paper. You have to hit the keys incredibly hard to make the letters show up on the bottom sheet.
Click, click, click.
And if you get caught with those papers, you go to jail. But people did it. They typed them, bound them, and passed them hand to hand in bags, in coats. Vanek became a folk hero. Everyone knew who Vanek was, even if they had never seen the play performed.
So he's a celebrity of the underground, but he's not a political organizer yet. He's an artist. What turns him into the leader of a movement?
Rock and roll.
I love this. It wasn't a tax hike. It wasn't a border dispute. It was a psychedelic rock band.
The Plastic People of the Universe.
Great name.
They were these long-haired, scruffy kids who loved the Velvet Underground, Frank Zappa. Their lyrics were weird, sometimes vulgar. They just wanted to play their music. But the regime arrested them in 1976.
Why? Were they singing Down with Communism?
No, that's the point. They were singing about nothing political. But in a totalitarian state, ignoring the state is a political act. By acting like they were free, they were challenging the state's monopoly on reality. Their crime was nonconformity.
And Havel saw this trial, and something clicked for him.
He sat in the courtroom, he looked at these kids, and he realized, if the system can put these boys in jail just for singing songs, then nobody is safe. He realized that the freedom to write high philosophy and the freedom to sing rock and roll are the same freedom.
It's the freedom to be yourself.
That is the spark for Charter 77.
It is. And Charter 77 changes everything. It changes the game from art to action.
So let's talk about Charter 77, because I think people hear manifesto and they think it was a call for revolution, for, storming the barricades. Was it?
Not at all. That's the brilliance of it. Charter 77 was a document signed by a loose group of dissidents, intellectuals, fired politicians, priests, artists. And all it said was, hey, government, you signed the Helsinki Accords on Human Rights in 1975.
Which they did.
We just want you to obey your own laws.
That's it. Follow the laws you signed.
That's it. They weren't asking for the overthrow of socialism. They were just pointing out the huge gap between the law on paper and the reality on the street. But to the regime, this was high treason.
Because it exposed the lie.
It exposed the fundamental hypocrisy of the whole system. And the crackdown was immediate.
Brutal. Signatories were fired from their jobs, interrogated, harassed, their kids were kicked out of school, and Havel was one of the 3 spokespersons for the charter. They came for him hard.
And this eventually leads to his longest imprisonment.
Yes. From 1979 to 1983, nearly 4 years.
4 years. That is a long time to sit in a cell, especially for a guy who, by all accounts, was a gentle soul. He wasn't a street fighter.
No, he was a chain-smoking intellectual. And prison nearly broke him physically. He had hemorrhoids, he had recurring pneumonia, he was treated terribly, but mentally, he turned the prison cell into a university.
This brings us to the letters to Olga.
Yes. He was allowed to write 1 letter a week to his wife, Olga, but he couldn't write about prison conditions or they would be censored.
So he couldn't say, the food is terrible, I'm sick.
Nothing like that. So he wrote about philosophy, he wrote about identity, responsibility, God, the human spirit. These letters, which were later published, are some of the most dense, profound, existential writings of the 20th century.
It's amazing. He's sitting in a concrete box, and he's exploring the cosmos of the human mind. But I want to pivot to the essay he wrote just before prison, because I think this is the key to understanding everything else.
The Power of the Powerless, 1978.
If you read one thing by Havel, make it this.
Absolutely.
We have to unpack the central analogy here, the greengrocer, because it explains why totalitarian regimes work and, maybe more importantly, how they fail.
Okay, so imagine a greengrocer. He manages a fruit and vegetable shop. Every morning he arranges the onions and the carrots, and then he takes a sign out of a box and puts it in the window. The sign says, "Workers of the world, unite."
Okay. Does he believe it? Is he thinking, yes, I hope the workers unite today, as he puts it up?
No. That's Havel's point. The greengrocer doesn't care about the workers of the world. He probably doesn't even read the sign. It's just part of the background scenery.
So why does he put it up?
He puts it up because that's what you do. It's expected. If he puts it up, the store manager won't yell at him. The secret police won't put him on a list. His children will be allowed to go to school. He puts it up to be left alone.
It's a signal. It says, I am obedient. I am not trouble.
Exactly. But Havel says that by putting up that sign, the greengrocer is living within a lie. He is confirming the system. The system relies on millions of greengrocers putting up signs they don't believe in. They create the facade that the system is popular and unanimous.
So the greengrocer is the victim, but he's also the enforcer. He is holding up the very system that oppresses him.
Yes. But then Havel asks the crucial question. What happens if one day the greengrocer snaps? What if he doesn't put up the sign?
The system panics.
The system has to punish him. Not because the sign itself matters, but because if one greengrocer refuses to lie, he shows everyone else that it's possible. He reveals that the emperor is naked.
He breaks the spell.
He breaks the spell. He threatens the entire structure of the appearance of agreement.
And that is living in truth.
Yes. It's not about storming the palace with a gun. It's about simply refusing to participate in the lie, refusing to vote in the rigged election, refusing to sign the loyalty pledge, saying what you actually think, even in a small way.
It sounds so simple, but the consequences are huge. The greengrocer will lose his job. He won't go on that vacation. His kids might have trouble.
Exactly. It's a huge personal risk.
Right.
But Havel argues that this power of the powerless is the only thing that can actually destroy the system from within. And he was right, because eventually the cost of enforcing the lie becomes too high for the regime.
So while Havel is in prison thinking about greengrocers, his fame is growing internationally. And Samuel Beckett, the actual king of absurdism, gets involved.
That was a huge moment. In 1982, Beckett writes a short play called Catastrophe. It's about a protagonist who stands silent on a pedestal while a director molds him, abuses him, and Beckett dedicated it to Havel.
Wow.
It was a message from the free world. We see you, we haven't forgotten.
Fast forward to 1989, the year the world turned upside down. The Berlin Wall falls. Regimes are crumbling across Eastern Europe. What is happening in Prague?
November 17th, 1989. A student demonstration is brutally suppressed by riot police. This is the spark. People are tired of being the greengrocer. They start coming out into the streets, first thousands, then hundreds of thousands.
And they gather on Wenceslas Square.
Right in front of the Lucerna Palace his grandfather built. The symbolism is just incredible. The square is packed with people jingling their keys.
Jingling keys, what was that about?
It was a symbol. It meant, goodbye, boys, time to go home. It was the sound of the final bell ringing on the regime. A beautifully nonviolent sound.
And Havel is right in the eye of the storm.
He's just been released from another shorter prison term. He helps found the Civic Forum. It's a chaotic mix of everyone who hates the communists. They are meeting in theater basements, in smoke-filled rooms, negotiating the transfer of power with a government that is just dissolving in front of their eyes.
And then, on December 29th, 1989, we get the moment that I still struggle to wrap my head around. The Federal Assembly needs to vote for a new president. Now, who is sitting in this assembly?
This is the best part. The assembly is still 100% controlled by the Communist Party. These are the same people who banned Havel's plays, who sent him to prison, who called him a class enemy his entire life.
And they vote for Václav Havel.
Unanimously.
That is, talk about absurdist theater. That is the plot of one of his plays. He couldn't have written it better.
It is the ultimate Havelian irony. The pressure from the hundreds of thousands of people in the streets was so intense, the collapse was so total, that the communists voted for their own executioner just to try and save their own skins.
They raised their hands for the man they had persecuted for 20 years.
And Havel, the man who just wanted to write plays, becomes the president.
The reluctant president.
He absolutely was. He kept insisting he didn't want the job. He said, I'll do it for 6 months until we have free elections. He wore pants that were too short for him to his inauguration. Intentionally or not, it became a symbol. He wasn't a slick politician. He's just a guy.
But the guy is now in the Prague castle. And reality hits hard. The party is over, and the hangover begins. Because governing is not the same as dissenting.
Governing in reality. That's the hard part. It's easy to be morally pure when you have no power. When you have power, you have to compromise. You have to make choices that affect millions of people.
One of the first major crises is the breakup of the country, the Velvet Divorce.
Yes. Czechoslovakia was a federation of two peoples, the Czechs and the Slovaks. But once the heavy hand of Moscow was lifted, the Slovaks wanted more autonomy. Nationalism bubbled up.
Havel fought this, right? He didn't want the country to split.
He hated the idea. He believed in a multi-ethnic federal state. He campaigned for it. But the political momentum driven by Václav Klaus in the Czech lands and Vladimir Mečiar in Slovakia was unstoppable. They wanted to split the assets and go their separate ways.
So what did Havel do when he saw he couldn't stop it?
He resigned. In July 1992, when it became clear the split was happening, he stepped down. He said he would not preside over the death of the country he swore to protect.
That's a principled move. He walked away.
He did, but he came back. Czechoslovakia ended on December 31st, 1992. And in January 1993, the new Czech Republic was born. And they needed a president. So Havel ran again, and he won. He became the first president of the Czech Republic.
So he survived the breakup. But let's talk about the policies. Because the sources show he made some decisions that really angered people. The Great Amnesty, for example.
This was huge, and it happened right after the revolution in 1990, one of his first acts. He declared a massive amnesty. He released about 2/3 of the prison population.
2/3? That's thousands of people. Why? What was the thinking there?
His logic was moral. It was pure Havel. He argued that the communist courts were corrupt and illegitimate. Therefore, the verdicts they handed out were suspect. He also said the prison conditions were inhumane. He wanted to signal that the new state was built on mercy, not vengeance.
A clean slate?
A very clean slate.
Yeah.
But I assume the public didn't love having thousands of convicts back on the streets overnight.
They hated it. The sources mentioned that crime rates tripled in the years following 1989. Now, some of that was just the chaos of opening the borders and economic transition. But the amnesty was blamed for a lot of it.
Were there specific cases?
Oh, yes. There were high-profile cases where released prisoners committed murders or rapes shortly after getting out.
Yeah.
And the press was all over it. That must have been heavy for him. knowing that his act of living in truth and mercy resulted in innocent people getting hurt.
It was a brutal lesson in consequences, a moral idea colliding with a messy reality. But he stuck to his guns. He believed it was the right thing to do, even if it was unpopular.
Another controversy was the Sudeten Germans. This is a deep historical wound.
Right. So after WWII, Czechoslovakia expelled millions of ethnic Germans as punishment for the Nazi occupation. It was a violent, ugly process. People lost their homes, their lives. For decades, the official Czech line was, they deserved it.
And Havel apologized.
He did. He called the expulsion immoral. He said collective guilt is wrong.
I can imagine that didn't play well at home. People probably called him a traitor.
They did. It was political dynamite. It's still a sensitive topic today. But internationally, it was viewed as incredibly brave. It showed that the Czech Republic was mature enough to face its own dark history. It smoothed the path for relations with Germany, which was crucial.
Seems like he often chose the moral path over the political path, but then we get to foreign policy, and he becomes surprisingly hawkish.
This surprises a lot of people. Havel was a pacifist at heart. In 1989, he wanted to dissolve both the Warsaw Pact and NATO. He wanted a Europe without blocs.
But he ended up being the guy pushing hardest for NATO expansion to the east.
He learned fast. He looked at the chaos in the Balkans, the instability in Russia, and he realized we need security. He pivoted completely. He became the biggest cheerleader for bringing the Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary into NATO.
And he considered the end of the Warsaw Pact his biggest achievement.
He said that specifically, dismantling the Soviet military alliance that had occupied his country for decades. That was the closure of 1968. That was personal.
But then, the Iraq War, 2003. This is a stain for a lot of his fans.
It is. Just before leaving office, he signed the Letter of the Eight. It was a statement from several European leaders supporting the U.S. position on Iraq, supporting the invasion.
Why? Why would the man of peace support a war that so many Europeans opposed?
2 reasons, based on the sources. 1, he valued the alliance with America deeply. He never forgot that the U.S. stood against the Soviets. He felt a sense of loyalty. And 2, he had a visceral hatred of dictators. He looked at Saddam Hussein and saw a totalitarian monster just like the ones he'd fought his whole life. He thought removing him was a moral imperative.
It's complicated. And then there's the humanitarian bombing quote regarding Yugoslavia.
That is a famous and very bitter controversy. During the NATO intervention in Kosovo in 1999, critics claimed Havel used the term humanitarian bombing to justify the airstrikes.
Did he?
Havel vehemently denied ever using those 2 words together. He called it a lie, a piece of propaganda spread by his opponents. But his critics, especially on the far left, used it to paint him as a hypocrite, a warmonger in philosopher's clothing.
It just goes to show that when you step out of the world of essays and into the world of cruise missiles, moral purity gets very muddy, very fast.
Absolutely. Governing in reality is a messy business.
Let's pivot to the man himself.
Yeah.
Because while he's dealing with NATO and amnesties, his personal life is chaotic.
To say the least. First, there was his health. The man was a chimney. He lived in a cloud of smoke for decades.
And it caught up with him.
Big time. He was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1996. He had half a lung removed. Then in 1998, he nearly died from a ruptured colon while on vacation in Austria. He spent a significant part of his presidency in and out of hospitals. He was frail.
And amidst all this, tragedy struck his family.
His wife, Olga, passed away from cancer in January 1996. Olga was his anchor. She was the one who kept him grounded. She was a formidable dissident in her own right. Tough, no nonsense. When she died, the nation mourned her deeply. She was revered.
And then rather quickly he remarried.
Yes, in 1997 to Dagmar Vyškova, a popular comedic actress.
That must have been a bit of a shock for the public.
It was a massive culture shock. Olga was this saintly, stoic figure. Dagmar was colorful, flamboyant, a celebrity. The tabloids went crazy. A lot of people felt he had moved on too fast, that it was disrespectful to Olga's memory. It damaged his popularity for a while.
And speaking of damage, we have to talk about the Lucerna Palace scandal. This feels like a plot point from a soap opera, but it's real.
It's a messy family business saga. Remember, the Lucerna was restituted, given back to the Havel family after the revolution. Havel owned half, and his brother's wife owned the other half.
But they couldn't get along.
It was a bitter public dispute. To resolve it, Havel sold his 50% stake, but he sold it to a man named Václav Havel, the head of a company called Chemapol.
And who was Junek?
That's the problem. Junek was a former communist spy and a businessman with a very shady reputation.
Ouch. So the moral leader of the nation, the man who preached living in truth, sells his family heritage to a former communist spy.
It looked terrible. It was a moment where the practical reality of needing to settle a messy property dispute collided violently with his moral image. It didn't destroy him, but it certainly humanized him in a flawed way. It showed he could make bad calls.
But despite the scandals, the health scares, the messy politics, he remained this massive cultural icon. He wasn't just a politician. He was the cool president.
He brought a bohemian vibe to the broad castle. He hated the pomp and circumstance. I heard he used to ride a scooter through the ancient hallways.
I love that image. He also hosted Frank Zappa as a cultural ambassador. He was friends with Lou Reed.
And that famous moment with Bill Clinton.
The Reduta Jazz Club in Prague, 1994. Havel takes Clinton there. Clinton borrows a saxophone and plays Summertime.
It was the defining image of the 90s era of optimism. The U.S. president and the playwright president jamming in a jazz club. It signaled to the world, the Cold War is over, we are free, we are cool.
And he also established the Forum 2000 conference.
Yes, starting in 1997. He wanted a space to discuss the really big questions: civilization, religion, human rights. He brought together Nobel laureates, religious leaders, thinkers from all over the world. It showed that he never stopped being an intellectual at heart. He wanted to solve the world's problems through dialogue, not just legislation.
So his presidency ends in 2003. Václav Klaus takes over, his political arch-rival, by the way.
Yeah.
What does Havel do? Does he retire to a golf course?
No, Havel didn't golf. He goes back to his roots. He goes back to the theater.
The final act.
Literally, he writes a new play called Leaving Ochazny, published in 2007.
And what is it about?
It is about a chancellor who is leaving power and has to move out of the government villa.
Laughs. I sense a theme here.
It's painfully autobiographical, but mixed with King Lear and Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard. It explores the loss of influence, the sycophants who disappear when you lose power, the emptiness of stepping down. It was art imitating life, imitating art.
And he even directed the film version of it.
He did in 2011. Even in his 70s, with failing health, he was still creating.
There is also a mention of a hunger strike in 2007. This really stood out to me. He's an ex-president, an elder statesman, and he goes on a hunger strike.
It was in support of a Kurdish doctor and activist named Yekta Uzunoglu, who was facing a protracted legal battle in the Czech Republic. Havel felt it was a grave injustice, so yes, the former head of state went on a symbolic hunger strike.
That's incredible.
It's unprecedented. It showed that the dissident inside him never really retired. He couldn't just watch an injustice happen, even if he was old and frail.
And he was getting frail.
Yes. His respiratory problems were severe, but he kept working. A week before he died, in December 2011, he met with the Dalai Lama in Prague.
The source mentions he was in a wheelchair for that meeting.
He was, but the photo of that meeting is powerful. Two spiritual giants, both of whom led their people through moral resistance, sharing a final moment.
And then, on December 18, 2011, he passed away at his country home, Prodsk.
Rachik is important. That was his sanctuary. It was a cottage in the woods. It was where he held underground concerts, where he wrote his plays, where the dissidents met during the bad years when the police were parked outside. It was fitting he died there.
The reaction was massive. A state funeral, a 21-gun salute.
And in true Havel fashion, a rock tribute concert at the Lucerna.
At his grandfather's palace.
It was the perfect send-off, the pomp of the state and the spirit of the underground all coming together in one place.
And today, his name is everywhere. The airport.
The Prague airport was renamed Václav Havel Airport Prague. That was actually a petition started by a film director, Fero Fenish. It got over 80,000 signatures in a week.
And there are the benches. I love the Havel's Place memorials.
They are beautiful designs by Bušek Šípek. Two garden chairs facing each other across a round table with a linden tree, the Czech national tree, growing through the center of the table.
It's an invitation to talk.
Exactly. It's not a statue of him on a horse looking heroic with a sword. It's an empty chair waiting for you to sit down and have a conversation. That encapsulates his legacy perfectly. Dialogue, connection, living in truth. You can find these benches in Washington, D.C., Dublin, Barcelona. It's a global network of conversation spots.
So let's bring this all together. We have walked through the life of a boy born into privilege, cast down to the brewery floor, raised up by his own pen to the presidency, and who left us as a legend. But what does this all mean for us? Why should the listener, sitting in traffic or doing dishes right now, care about a Czech playwright from the 80s?
I think it comes back to that concept of living in truth. We live in an era that feels very different from 1970s Czechoslovakia, But in some ways, the challenges are similar. We are bombarded with information, disinformation, pressure to conform, pressure to just go along with things we know aren't quite right.
The greengrocer's sign.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We all have our versions of the greengrocer sign. Maybe it's not a communist slogan. Maybe it's performative behavior on social media. Maybe it's silence in the face of corporate malpractice at your job. Maybe it's just cynicism, saying nothing matters.
Havel teaches us that the antidote to a powerless situation isn't necessarily a grand revolution. It's the small, daily act of refusing to lie.
The power of the powerless. It's the idea that your integrity matters even when you think you are insignificant, even when you are just rolling barrels in a brewery.
And that politics doesn't have to be just about power and transaction. Havel believed politics should be moral. He believed that conscience should drive policy. Now, did he always succeed? No. We discussed his failures, the amnesty, the property deals. He wasn't a saint.
But he tried. He brought a human soul into the machinery of the state. He proved that you don't have to be a shark to be a leader.
Which leads to the provocative thought I want to leave everyone with. You look at Havel, a chain-smoking philosopher, absurdist playwright, a man who apologized for his country's history, a man who admitted his doubts openly. Could someone like that be elected today?
That is the big question. In our current world of hyper-pragmatism, sound bites, big data, and polished image consultants, Havel seems like a glitch in the matrix. Was he a historical accident that can never be repeated? Or is he a model that we have forgotten how to look for?
A historical accident or a blueprint for the future. That is something to chew on.
Indeed.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the incredible life of Václav Havel. Go find a bench, sit down with a friend, and tell the truth. We'll see you next time.